It was late in the afternoon when the sky began to shift from bright blue to the soft orange of early evening. The young man drove down the quiet road with the windows slightly open, letting the warm air brush against his face. He had just finished another long day at work, the kind of day that made him feel even more stuck than usual. His job paid the bills, but that was all it did. Every day felt the same. Wake up, go to work, come home tired, sleep, repeat. He could feel time passing. But nothing in his life was moving forward. He tried not to think about it too much. But the thoughts always found a way back into his mind. He had applied to so many places, hoping to find a job that would challenge him, a place where he could grow or learn something new. Some companies never replied at all. Others sent simple rejection messages. There were days when he wondered if anyone even read his applications. He wanted a chance, just one chance. But life did not seem to be listening as he drove. He let out a slow breath and tried to focus on the quiet around him. The road stretched ahead, mostly empty. The sunset made everything look softer, almost peaceful. He wished he could feel that peace inside himself. But instead he felt a weight pressing on his chest, the kind that stayed with him even on calm days. He glanced at the trees lining the road, trying to distract himself. Their shadows stretched long across the ground, swaying gently as the wind touched them. The world around him looked relaxed, but he could not shake the feeling that he was wasting time, that he should be doing something more meaningful. But life didn't always offer choices. Sometimes he just had to keep driving. A few minutes later, he saw something up ahead, on the side of the road. At first, he couldn't tell what it was. Maybe an animal? Maybe someone parked to admire the sunset. He leaned forward slightly, trying to make sense of the shape. As he got closer, he realized it was a car pulled over on the shoulder. The hood was up, and a faint line of smoke drifted into the air. He slowed down. There was an elderly man standing beside the car, leaning slightly on the door, as if trying to gather his strength. The man looked confused, maybe even scared, though he was trying to hide it. Cars passed by, one after another, without slowing down. Some drivers glanced over, then quickly turned away. Others didn't even look. The young man hesitated. He didn't know the man. He wasn't a mechanic. What if he made things worse? What if the man didn't want help? He had places to be, even if none of them were important. Maybe someone else would stop, but he kept looking at the old man's face. There was something about the way the man stood there, trying to stay calm while clearly struggling. Something inside the young man told him, couldn't just drive away. He pulled over a short distance ahead and stepped out of his car. The warm air felt heavier now, mixed with the faint smell of the overheated engine. He walked toward the old man slowly so he wouldn't startle him. "Are you okay?" the young man asked gently. The elderly man turned his head. He looked tired, like he had been standing there for a long time. I think the engine overheated," he said softly. "I'm not sure what happened. I was driving to an appointment, and then the car started shaking. I pulled over as soon as I could." The young man nodded. Up close, he could see that the man's hands were trembling slightly. He seemed afraid to touch the car again. "It's all right," the young man said. "Let me take a look. Maybe I can help." The old man gave him a grateful but uncertain smile. "I don't want to trouble you. You must be on your way somewhere. It's no trouble." "I can spare a few minutes," the young man replied. He genuinely meant it. Something about the situation made him forget about his own problems for the moment. He approached the engine. The heat rising from it was intense. He leaned back slightly to avoid breathing in the smoke. With slow, careful movements, he checked the radiator first. "It looks like it overheated pretty badly," he said, speaking loud enough for the elderly man to hear. "Do you have any water in the car?" The old man shook his head. The young man thought for a moment, then remembered the large water bottle he kept in his back seat. It wasn't much, but it might help cool the engine enough to calm things down. He walked back to his car, grabbed the bottle, and returned. The old man watched him with a surprised expression, as if he didn't expect a stranger to put in this much effort. The young man slowly poured water over the metal, careful not to spill too much in any one spot. The steam hissed softly as the engine cooled. It took a while, but little by little, the smoke faded, When the steam cleared, he checked the engine again. It wasn't perfect, but at least it looked stable enough to inspect. He noticed a loose belt, worn and stretched. It wasn't an impossible fix, but it required steady hands. He turned to the old man. "Do you have any tools in your car?" he asked. The man nodded slowly and pointed to the trunk. The young man opened it and found a small, simple toolkit, nothing fancy, but enough for basic repairs. He knelt beside the engine and began working. The belt was loose and slipping off the wheel. He tightened it carefully, making sure it sat in the right place. The sun continued to fall behind the trees, casting a soft glow over everything. Sweat gathered on his forehead, but he kept going. The elderly man stood nearby, watching quietly. Every so often, he tried to speak as if wanting to say something, but each time he stopped himself. He seemed unsure, maybe afraid of interrupting. After a while, the young man sat back and wiped his hands on his pants. "It should hold now," he said. "At least long enough for you to get where you need to go or reach a mechanic." The old man's eyes widened with relief. "You fixed it?" "I think so," the young man replied with a small smile, "but take it slow. Overheating like that can come back if the engine's old." The elderly man reached into his pocket and pulled out a few bills. "Please, take this," he said. "You've done more than enough. I can't just let you leave without something in return." The young man shook his head and gently pushed the money back toward him. "I'm not taking that. I just wanted to help." "But you saved me," the old man said, his voice breaking a little. "I was starting to panic. People kept driving past. I didn't know what to do." "You're all right now," the young man said. "That's enough for me." For the first time since the young man had arrived, the old man's shoulders relaxed. He looked down, then back up, his eyes soft with gratitude. "This world still has people like you," he whispered, almost as if speaking to himself. The young man felt a small warmth inside his chest. It had been a long time since anyone's words had touched him like that. He didn't think he had done anything special, just what anyone should do when they saw someone in need. The old man leaned against the car door for a moment, gathering himself. "May I ask something?" he said. "Why did you stop?" "So many people didn't." The young man paused, thinking. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just saw you standing there, and it didn't feel right to drive away. I'd hope someone would do the same for me if I were in trouble." The old man gave a slow nod. "Not many think that way anymore." He hesitated again. "What's your name?" The young man told him. The old man repeated it softly, as if wanting to remember. "I will not forget what you did today," he said quietly. "People say small actions don't matter, but that's not true. Sometimes a small act can change everything." The young man didn't think much of the words then. To him, he had simply helped someone who needed it. But the old man's expression said he believed deeply in what he was saying. The young man stepped back as the elderly man got into his car. The engine took a moment, then started with a shaky but steady sound. The old man let out a breath of relief. "Thank you," he said again through the open window. "You didn't have to stop, but you did. I won't forget it." The young man waved lightly. "Drive safe." The old man pulled away slowly, the car moving carefully down the road. The young man watched until the car disappeared around a bend. Then he turned back to his own car, feeling strangely lighter than before. He had stopped without expecting anything. He didn't know the old man, didn't know where he was going or why it mattered so much. All he knew was that it felt right. As he drove home, he noticed the sunset again. It looked brighter this time, warmer. He felt a small spark of hope inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Helping the old man hadn't changed his job, his rejections, or his worries. But it had changed something else, something in his heart. He didn't know it yet. But that small action, the simple choice to stop on the side of the road, was about to set a chain of events in motion. A chain that would reach farther than he could imagine. A chain that would soon change the course of his life forever. The next morning arrived quietly. But the young man felt something different when he woke up. He couldn't explain it clearly, but the feeling from yesterday still stayed with him. Helping the elderly man had brought him a rare sense of peace, something he hadn't felt in a long while. Even though today looked like another ordinary day, He carried a lighter heart as he got ready for work. He stepped outside, locked the door behind him, and breathed in the fresh morning air. The sun had just risen, painting everything with soft golden light. Usually mornings felt heavy for him, but today felt strangely calm. He didn't know why, but part of him wondered if something good might happen. He shook the thought away, thinking he was being too hopeful. He walked toward his car and sat inside. As he started the engine, he thought again about the old man and the moment they shared on the roadside. He wondered if the car had made it safely to wherever the man needed to go. He hoped it had. He considered giving the man a call if he had taken the number, but then realized the old man had his number, not the other way around. He sighed lightly and pushed the thought aside. The drive to work was mostly quiet. The streets were still partly empty, and the morning breeze crossed gently through the gap in his window. He passed the same road where he had helped the old man the day before. For a second, he slowed down and looked at the spot on the shoulder. Nothing remained there now, just a long, empty stretch of pavement lit by the morning sun. Yet, the memory of yesterday stood so clear in his mind that the place felt meaningful. He continued driving and reached his workplace a little later. The building was the same as always, plain walls, dull colors, and people walking in and out with tired faces. He parked his car and walked inside. The moment he stepped through the doors, he felt the familiar weight settle on his shoulders again. But he tried to keep his spirits up, remembering the small warmth in his chest from yesterday. His shift began as usual, with routine tasks and familiar sounds filling the space around him. Machines hummed, people talked, and the hours moved slowly. He did his work carefully, trying to stay focused, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the elderly man. He wondered if the man had reached his appointment in time. He wondered why the man had looked so shaken. He wondered where he was going and who he was. The young man didn't expect anything in return for his help. And he still didn't, but something inside him wished he could know the old man was okay. By lunchtime, he walked outside to sit on a bench near the building. He preferred having lunch alone most days. Not because he disliked people, but because he liked the quiet. He opened the simple meal he had brought from home and looked around at the moving world cars passing. People walking, birds flying from one tree to another. He took a bite and let his mind rest for a moment. As he sat there eating, a coworker walked by and nodded at him in greeting. The young man smiled softly and nodded back. The coworker paused for a moment, as if wanting to talk, but then walked away. The young man didn't mind. He liked peace during his breaks. The rest of the day continued without much change. He finished his shift and headed back to his car. As he drove home, the sky once again began to turn orange and pink. The colors reminded him of yesterday's sunset. He wondered if the elderly man had seen a sunset that beautiful after they parted ways. He reached home, unlocked his door, and stepped inside. The house was small and simple, but it was enough for him. He changed into comfortable clothes, washed his face, and sat down on the couch. He let himself relax for a while, enjoying the quiet. That evening, he cooked a simple dinner, ate slowly, and then stood by the window to watch the last bits of daylight fade. A gentle breeze came through the cracks of the window, bringing in the cool air of early night. He closed the window, turned off the lights, and sat on the couch again. He looked at his phone for a moment. No missed calls. No new messages. He knew he shouldn't expect anything. But a small part of him still wondered whether the old man might reach out. Eventually, he put the phone down and went to bed. The day had been calm and uneventful, but it felt complete in a peaceful way. The next day, he woke up early again. This time, the feeling of calm was still there, but it was lighter, easier to carry. He went through his morning routine quickly, grabbed his keys, headed out. His car engine hummed softly as he drove down the familiar roads. It was a normal day, nothing special, but he still felt a quiet sense that something was different in the air. He didn't know what, but he could feel it. Work went on as usual again. Hours moved slowly. People came and went. He completed his tasks without much trouble. But as the day neared its end, something unexpected happened. He was standing near the supply shelves when his phone buzzed inside his pocket. It wasn't common for him to get calls during work hours. He took out his phone and looked at the screen. The number was unfamiliar. His eyebrows twitched slightly in surprise. He hesitated for a second, then answered. "Hello," he said quietly. There was a moment of silence on the other side. Then a gentle, familiar voice spoke. "Is this the young man who helped me with the car?" The young man froze for a second. The voice was older, soft but steady. He recognized it immediately. "Yes," he replied, surprised but relieved. "It's me. Are you all right?" A small chuckle came through the speaker. "More than all right," the elderly man said warmly. "I wanted to call earlier, but I wasn't sure if it was the right time." The young man felt his heartbeat steady again. "I'm glad you called," he said honestly. "I was wondering if you made it to your appointment safely." "I did," the old man replied, "and I could not have done it without your help." Hearing the appreciation in that gentle voice made the young man smile to himself. "I'm happy to hear that, but that's not the only reason I'm calling." The old man continued softly. The young man felt his chest tighten with curiosity. "Oh, I wanted to speak to you properly," the man said. "Not just to thank you, but because, well, there's something I've been thinking about since yesterday." For a moment, the young man didn't know what to say. He glanced around the room, making sure no one was listening. "What is it?" he asked quietly. "I was hoping," the old man said, "that you might be free to meet me tomorrow afternoon. There's something I would like to discuss with you. Something important." The young man blinked in surprise. "Meet you?" "Yes," the man replied gently. "I promise it's nothing dangerous or troublesome. In fact, it may be something that could help you. I cannot explain everything over the phone, but I would be grateful if you could spare me half an hour." The young man felt his breath catch. The old man's tone wasn't urgent, but it carried meaning. Something serious. Something that felt almost heavy, but not in a bad way. I can meet you," the young man said slowly. "Tomorrow afternoon works for me." "Good," the man said, relief clear in his voice. "There's a small cafe by the riverside. I can text you the address. It's a quiet place. I think it will be suitable." The young man nodded even though the man couldn't see him. "I'll be there." "Thank you," the elderly man said softly. "And thank you again for what you did yesterday. Some people help because they want something, but you helped because it was right. I noticed that." The young man felt something warm rise in his chest again, stronger this time. "I'm glad I could help," he said sincerely. "I will send you the address shortly," the old man said. "Good evening, my boy. Rest well." The call ended. The young man stood still for a moment, phone in hand, trying to process everything. He wasn't imagining it. Something had shifted. Something had begun. He walked outside the building slowly, feeling the cool air settle around him. The sky was dimming again, the first signs of dusk appearing. He leaned against his car for a moment and let out a long breath. He didn't know what the elderly man wanted to talk about. He didn't know why he sounded so serious or what he meant by something that could help him. But the young man felt no fear. Instead, he felt a calm curiosity, almost like a pull. He got into his car and drove home, the quiet road stretching before him. Every second felt slow, thoughtful. He kept wondering what tomorrow's meeting would bring. By the time he reached home, the message had arrived. The address was sent simply, without explanation. He read it twice. Then he sat quietly on the edge of his bed, staring at the message for the first time in a long while. Tomorrow didn't feel like just another day. Tomorrow felt like something was waiting for him, something important, something he didn't see coming. When he stopped to help an elderly man on the side of the road, the next day arrived slower than usual, as if the world itself knew something meaningful was waiting. The young man woke up earlier than his alarm, his mind already busy with thoughts about the meeting he had agreed to. He lay in bed for a moment, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the elderly man wanted to discuss. The more he tried to guess, the more confused he became. Eventually, he sat up, stretched, and got out of bed. He went through his morning routine, though it felt different today. Even brushing his teeth, washing his face, and preparing a simple breakfast felt heavier, like the air carried a quiet sense of anticipation. He ate slowly, glancing at his phone every now and then, as if expecting another message. The address the elderly man had sent was a place the young man had never visited. He had heard of the Riverside Cafe before, a small and peaceful spot known for its calm environment. People often went there to read, work quietly, or simply enjoy the sound of flowing water. He wondered why the elderly man chose that place. Maybe he liked peaceful spots too. As the afternoon approached, the young man got ready. He changed into clean clothes and checked himself in the mirror. He wasn't dressing up for anything fancy, but he wanted to look presentable. He didn't know who the man really was, but something in his voice yesterday told the young man the meeting was important. He grabbed his keys, stepped out of the house, and locked the door. The weather was pleasant, warm sunlight, with a soft breeze that brushed gently against his skin. He walked toward his car, feeling the mix of calmness and nervousness settle inside him. The drive to the cafe was quiet. The streets were not too crowded, and the sunlight sparkled on the windshield. He followed the map on his phone until he turned onto a narrow road surrounded by tall trees. Their leaves rustled lightly as the wind passed through them. After a few minutes, he spotted the cafe, a small, charming place built close to the riverbank. It had large glass windows, wooden chairs outside, and small round tables decorated with tiny potted plants. The sound of flowing water from the river added a peaceful rhythm to the place. He parked his car and stepped out, taking a moment to look around. The atmosphere was calming, almost soothing. People sat in small groups or alone, sipping drinks, reading books, or simply watching the water. He scanned the area, looking for the elderly man. He didn't see him at first, so he walked slowly toward the cafe entrance. As he reached the doorway, he noticed someone sitting near the window inside, a familiar figure with soft gray hair and a gentle posture. The elderly man looked up, saw him, and smiled. He raised his hand slightly in greeting. The young man made his way toward him. "It's good to see you again," the elderly man said warmly as the young man approached. "It's good to see you too," the young man replied. Taking the seat across from him, the old man looked healthier today. His hands were steady, his posture relaxed. It was clear that he had recovered from yesterday's stress. "I hope I didn't trouble you by asking you to come," the man said politely. "No, not at all," the young man said. "I was actually curious about why you wanted to meet." The elderly man nodded slowly, as if gathering his thoughts. "Yes, I thought we should talk properly. Yesterday, when you helped me, I realized something important about you." The young man blinked, unsure how to respond. "About me?" "Yes," the man replied, folding his hands on the table. "There is a certain kindness in you, a sincerity most people have forgotten. Not many would stop for an elderly stranger on the side of the road, especially without wanting anything in return." The young man felt slightly embarrassed. "I didn't do anything special," he said. "I just helped because it felt right," and that, the old man said gently, is exactly what makes it special. A server came by and placed 2 glasses of water on the table. The elderly man thanked them with a polite smile before turning back to the young man. "There's something I didn't tell you yesterday," he said. The young man looked at him curiously. "Waiting. I wasn't just on my way to an appointment," the elderly man explained. "I was heading to a meeting with a company I have been advising for several years. Even though I'm retired now, I occasionally guide them on certain matters." The young man nodded. Listening carefully, "They recently asked me to help them find new, reliable, hard-working individuals for some of their departments," the old man continued. "People who don't just work for money, but who work with heart, people who care." The young man felt his breath catch. His chest tightened slightly. He wasn't sure what the man was implying, but his heart began beating faster. The elderly man leaned back in his chair. Observing the young man's reaction, "When you helped me yesterday," he said softly, "you showed me the kind of character that cannot be trained or bought. You showed kindness without expecting reward. You showed patience when you didn't have to. You showed genuine care for someone you didn't even know." The young man stayed quiet, unsure what to say. "You see," the old man continued, "that company values people with such qualities. And when I reached the meeting yesterday, the first thing I did was tell them about you." The young man's eyes widened in shock. "Me, yes," the man said with a calm smile. I told them about the young man who stopped on a quiet road to help an elderly stranger. I told them you were sincere, capable, and thoughtful. And I told them that someone like you deserved a real opportunity. The young man felt warmth flood through his body. He didn't know what to think. He didn't know what to say. He had never expected anything like this. I hope you don't mind, the old man said gently. I took the liberty of sending your number to one of their hiring managers. I told them to reach out to you. They seemed very interested. The young man sat still, trying to process the words. You did that for me? I did, the old man said calmly, because you helped me when you didn't have to. And because I believe people like you should be given chances, not overlooked. The young man lowered his gaze, his throat tightening with emotion. He swallowed slowly. You didn't have to do that, he whispered. The elderly man smiled kindly. I know, but I wanted to. Not as repayment, but because it felt right, just as it felt right for you to stop yesterday. Silence settled between them for a moment, but it was a warm silence, filled with meaning. The young man looked up again. Thank you, he said softly. I don't even know how to express how much this means. You don't need to, the elderly man said. I didn't help you for gratitude. I helped you because sometimes life brings people together for a reason. He took a sip of water, then continued. Young man, opportunities don't always come from resumes or interviews. Sometimes they come from moments when your true nature shows. Yesterday was one such moment. The young man nodded slowly, still overwhelmed. The elderly man leaned forward slightly. Of course, I cannot promise what will happen, but they will contact you soon. I can assure you that. The young man took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. The thought of being noticed, being valued, being given a chance at almost felt unreal. After years of trying and failing, this sudden shift felt like stepping into a different world. The elderly man reached into his pocket, pulled out a small card. He placed it gently on the table. This has my number, he said. If you ever need anything, even advice, don't hesitate to call. The young man picked up the card, holding it carefully. I will, he said. They spent the next hour talking, not about jobs or opportunities or stress, but about life, values, and experiences. The old man shared stories from his youth, from the days when he was full of dreams and had to work hard to make them real. The young man listened with interest, feeling a strange warmth grow between them. The conversation flowed naturally, almost like they had known each other for a long time. The elderly man spoke with gentle wisdom, and the young man replied with thoughtful honesty as the sun began to lower. Casting soft golden light over the river, the elderly man finally said, I should get going now. The young man nodded. Of course, they both stood up. The elderly man extended his hand, and the young man shook it gently. Take care of yourself, the old man said warmly. Life is full of surprises. Yesterday was one of them, and I think more are coming your way. The young man nodded, grateful beyond words. Thank you for everything. The elderly man smiled, turned, and slowly walked away. His steps were calm and steady. The young man watched him leave, feeling something shift deep inside him, something hopeful, something new. When the old man disappeared around the corner, the young man turned toward the river. The water glistened softly in the fading sunlight, moving gently, peacefully. He stood there for a moment, letting the calm wash over him. Then he took out his phone. No new messages, but somehow, he knew they would come soon. For the first time in a long time, he felt his future opening, changing. Moving all because he stopped to help a stranger on a quiet road. The call came early in the morning, long before the young man had even finished rubbing the sleep from his eyes. His phone buzzed on the small table beside his bed, and he grabbed it without thinking much, expecting maybe a bank message or one of those promotional texts he always ignored. But when he pressed the phone to his ear, the voice on the other end made him sit up straight. It was the elderly man he had helped on the road a few days earlier. The voice sounded warm and steady, and despite the surprise, the young man felt a strange calm spread through him. He greeted the man with respect, asking if everything was all right and whether his car problems had been fixed. The old man chuckled gently and said he had managed to get things sorted out. But then his tone shifted. It became more serious, almost thoughtful. He said he had been meaning to call earlier, but wanted to take his time and think things through. The young man listened quietly, wondering what this was leading to. The man then told him something that left him frozen for a moment. Not only had he been driving to an important meeting that day, but that meeting had been with one of the most respected companies in the city. He mentioned that even though he was retired, he still worked as a consultant, helping companies find people who had not just skill but character. The young man blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. He had never imagined the man he helped was someone with influence, someone who still had connections in places he had only dreamed of reaching. He was still trying to wrap his head around it, and the elderly man continued. He explained that he had told the company's hiring team about the young man, not just in passing, but with genuine belief. He had described how the young man stopped without hesitation, how he worked patiently on the car, how he never asked for money or recognition. He spoke about the sharp mind he noticed, the honesty in his words, and the way he listened without trying to impress. The young man felt a warmth move through his chest as he listened, a kind of gratitude he didn't know how to express. The elderly man went on to explain that he had requested the hiring team to contact the young man and give him a chance. A real chance. Not a polite interview that leads nowhere, but a conversation that could actually open a door. For a moment, the young man couldn't speak. He kept looking around his small room, almost as if he expected someone to jump out and tell him it was all a dream. His mind drifted to all the times he had applied to jobs and never heard back. All the interviews he went to where he felt like his words didn't matter. All the weeks he had struggled to keep his hopes alive. Now, someone he barely knew had done more for him than anyone else had. All because he stopped to help. His voice finally returned, though it trembled slightly as he thanked the older man again and again. But the man simply said he was only returning the kindness that had been shown to him. He didn't make it sound grand or dramatic. He spoke like someone who truly believed in giving others a chance. Before hanging up, the elderly man reminded him to be himself during the interview. "You don't need to pretend," he said softly. "Just carry the same heart you carried that day on the road. That is enough." Call ended, but the young man didn't move for a while. He sat on the edge of his bed, holding the phone gently, replaying the conversation in his head. His heart felt lighter than it had in a long time. Something inside him shifted, as if a window had opened and fresh air had filled the room by the time afternoon arrived. He received another call, this time from a company representative. The woman who spoke to him sounded formal yet enthusiastic. She mentioned that the company had reviewed his brief information and wanted to invite him for an interview in the coming days. She listed the date and time, and he wrote it down with shaking hands. Every word she spoke felt unreal, like a part of a story he wasn't sure he belonged in. But it was happening. After ending the call, he rushed to tell his family. They looked at him with surprise and happiness, asking him again and again how it all happened. When he explained, they shook their heads with disbelief and admiration. They reminded him that good things come to those who act with kindness, even when they expect nothing in return. Later that evening, he sat alone in the small outdoor space behind his home, staring at the sky as the last bit of sunlight faded. His mind was full of thoughts, hope, excitement, fear, and gratitude, all mixed together. He wondered what the interview would be like, what the office would look like, who he would meet, and whether he would be able to show them his true potential. He remembered how lost he felt just a week earlier, unsure of his future and doubting his own abilities. Now, one moment of kindness had brought him here. It amazed him how life could change so quickly, how unexpected connections could lead to new paths. He also thought about the elderly man, how gentle his voice was, how wise his words sounded. It was clear he was someone who had seen life from many angles, someone who understood that small actions could shape big outcomes. That night he couldn't sleep much. His mind kept imagining the day of the interview. He wondered if his clothes were good enough. He didn't have fancy shirts or expensive shoes, but he made sure what he had was clean and neat. He stood in front of the mirror, practicing his introduction softly. reminding himself to speak naturally and not force anything. He didn't want to sound rehearsed. He wanted to be honest. The next few days passed slowly. He was nervous, but also full of energy. Every morning he woke up with new thoughts about how he should prepare, but deep down he remembered the elderly man's advice, just be himself. That simple sentence kept him grounded, reminding him not to overthink or try to pretend. On the night before the interview, he went to bed early, but sleep still didn't come quickly. He kept thinking about that moment on the road, the dusty air, the overheated car, the old man's grateful expression. At the time, he had no idea that his choice would lead to this. If he had driven past like everyone else, none of this would be happening. He felt a quiet sense of pride, not the kind that rises like a loud celebration, but the calm kind that settles in the heart. He realized something important. Doing good for others didn't just help them, it also shaped the kind of person he was becoming. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was moving towards something meaningful. The morning of the interview finally arrived. He woke up before dawn, washed his face, combed his hair, and put on his cleanest clothes. His hands shook a little as he buttoned his shirt. But he took a deep breath and reminded himself that this was a chance, not a test. A chance he didn't want to waste. He walked out of his home with determination. The streets were still quiet, and the cool air helped steady his nerves. He had arranged transportation the day before, not wanting to take any risks. While sitting during the ride, he kept looking out the window at the passing buildings, imagining himself working in a place filled with opportunity, responsibility, and growth. When he reached the company building, he stood outside for a moment. The tall glass structure looked impressive, almost intimidating, but he reminded himself that he had come this far. He took another breath and walked toward the entrance. Each step felt like part of a new journey, one he had never expected, but now felt ready to face. Inside the building, everything looked clean and polished. People walked with purpose, and the young man felt a mixture of awe and determination. He made his way to the reception desk, where a friendly staff member guided him to the waiting area. He sat down quietly, folding his hands to keep them from shaking. As he waited, he thought again about the elderly man. He wondered what he would say if he were standing beside him right now. Probably something simple yet encouraging. Something like, "You've already done your part. Now just trust yourself." That thought made him smile softly. He straightened his posture and prepared himself as the minutes passed. Soon his name would be called, and he would walk into a room that could change everything. But no matter what happened, he already felt grateful for the journey that brought him here. The moment of the interview was approaching, but he didn't feel alone. Somewhere in the city, the elderly man who once needed help on a quiet road believed in him. And sometimes, that was all someone needed to know, that at least one person truly believed in their potential. This belief, quiet but steady, stayed with him as he heard his name called. He stood up, took one more deep breath, and walked forward with calm confidence. Whatever came next, he was ready. The young man stepped into the interview room with a quiet breath, trying to steady the mix of nerves and hope inside him. The room wasn't as intimidating as he imagined. It was bright, calm, and simple. 3 people sat behind a table, each with papers in front of them. They looked up at him with polite smiles, not the cold expressions he had seen in past interviews. Something about their eyes told him this wasn't going to be like any interview he'd had before. He greeted them respectfully, sat down, and folded his hands gently to keep them from shaking. They introduced themselves and then began asking him questions. Not the tricky kind that made people feel small, but the thoughtful kind that helped him open up. They asked about his past work, his skills, his goals, and the things he cared about. At first, he answered carefully, making sure he didn't say anything wrong. But slowly, he started to relax. The more he spoke, the more natural he felt. He talked about what he hoped to do in the future, the kind of work he enjoyed, and how he believed in helping people whenever he could. He didn't mention the incident with the elderly man unless they asked, but he didn't need to. They were already aware. It was written in the notes in front of them. His character had spoken for him long before he entered the room. The panel members listened closely. One of them even leaned forward during a moment when the young man described how he learned to stay calm in difficult situations. Another nodded when he talked about wanting to grow at a place where he could truly contribute. Their interest made him feel seen in a way he wasn't used to. After nearly an hour of conversation, the interview came to an end. They thanked him warmly and told him they would be in touch soon. He stood, shook their hands, and walked out with a calm but hopeful heart. This time, he felt different. He didn't feel like he had to pretend. He didn't feel judged. He felt understood. And that alone was worth something. Once outside the building, he paused on the sidewalk and took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill his lungs. He whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude, not only for the opportunity, but for the old man who believed in him when no one else had. He walked away with light steps, trying not to expect too much but unable to stop the small spark of hope burning in his chest. The next few days passed slowly again, even more slowly than before. Every time his phone buzzed, his heart jumped. He kept wondering whether they were discussing his interview at that very moment or if his application was still sitting on someone's desk. His family kept encouraging him, telling him not to worry. But waiting was never easy. On the fourth day, late in the afternoon, his phone finally rang. He picked it up quickly, though he tried to hide the excitement in his voice. It was the same woman from the company who had called earlier. She asked if he had a moment to talk. His heart raced as he said yes. She took a short breath and then told him the words he had been waiting to hear. He had been selected. He got the job. For a moment, his world fell silent. He didn't even realize he had stopped breathing. He stood there, frozen, staring at the wall as her words echoed in his mind. When he finally managed to speak, his voice cracked slightly as he thanked her again and again. She explained the next steps, the paperwork, the joining date, and all the things he would need to know. But he could barely focus. All he could feel was overwhelming relief and deep gratitude. That evening, he told his family, and they celebrated in their simple way clapping, hugging, smiling, and thanking the one above for this unexpected blessing. The young man felt a warmth fill his chest as he looked around at their proud faces. It wasn't just a job. It was the beginning of something new. Something he had dreamed of but didn't think would happen so soon. Later that night, after the excitement settled, he stepped outside for fresh air. He pulled out his phone and called the elderly man. The phone rang a few times before the old, familiar voice answered. When the young man told him the news, the man chuckled warmly and said, "I knew you would get it." The young man thanked him sincerely, his voice soft but full of emotion. He told him how much the opportunity meant, and how he would never forget the kindness that changed his path. But the elderly man only replied, "All I did was open a door. You're the one who walked through it. Never forget that." Those words stayed with him long after the call ended. They weren't just words, they were a reminder that his hard work, his sincerity, and his heart mattered. Someone had noticed, and it made all the difference. When his first day at the company arrived, he dressed in his best clothes again and made his way to the building. But this time, he felt completely different. He wasn't a nervous applicant anymore. He was part of the team. When he walked through the doors, he felt proud, hopeful, and ready to start the next chapter of his life. His coworkers greeted him warmly and showed him around the office. His manager explained his role and responsibilities. Everything felt new, busy, and exciting. The young man listened carefully, eager to learn. He took notes, asked questions, and tried to absorb as much as he could. Even though the work looked challenging at times, he was determined to give his best. As the days turned into weeks, people noticed his dedication. They saw how he stayed focused, how he listened, how he quietly helped others whenever he could. The same qualities that led him to help the elderly man were now becoming his strengths at work. He arrived early most days, left late when he needed to, and slowly began earning the trust of his team. His manager often complimented him on his patience and willingness to learn. One afternoon, his manager pulled him aside and said, "You're doing well. Keep going." Those simple words made him smile for the rest of the day. Months passed, and he continued growing, learning new skills, solving problems. taking on responsibilities he once thought he wasn't ready for. He didn't rush anything. He just kept steady, humble, and focused. People around him respected him for that. One evening, while packing up to go home, he received a message on his phone. It was from the elderly man again. Just a short message. Hope you're doing well. Proud of you. The young man stared at the screen and smiled softly. He replied with gratitude and told the old man that he wished to meet him again someday. A week later, they arranged to meet at a quiet cafe in the city. When the young man arrived, he saw the older man sitting at a table by the window, smiling warmly. They greeted each other, and the young man shared everything: the job, the challenges, the achievements, and how he was slowly building a life he could be proud of. The elderly man listened with gentle eyes, nodding occasionally. When the young man finished, the older man placed a hand on the table and said, "This is why kindness matters. You never know how far it can travel." They talked for a long time, not just about work, but about life, choices, and the importance of doing good without expecting anything back. The young man left the cafe that evening with a deeper understanding of what the simple moment on the road had truly meant. It wasn't just good luck. It wasn't just a random event. It was a lesson, one that shaped both his heart and his future. As time went on, the young man continued to grow in his career. His confidence improved, his experience widened, and his future became clearer. He kept helping people whenever he could, remembering how one simple act had changed his life. Sometimes he thought about what would have happened if he had driven past that day like everyone else. But he didn't dwell on it. He simply carried the lesson with him. Small acts can lead to big changes. One evening, months later, as he drove home from work, he passed the same road where he had once stopped to help the elderly man. He slowed down for a moment, remembering everything: the overheated car, the dusty air, the man's grateful voice. A soft smile appeared on his face. Life had come a long way. As he drove further, he noticed someone standing beside a stopped vehicle. A young woman trying to push her car to the side. Without thinking twice, he pulled over. He stepped out of his car, walked toward her, and asked gently, "Do you need help?" The story had come full circle, not because he wanted a reward, but because he understood now more than ever what kindness could do. And with that simple choice, another journey quietly began somewhere in the world, just as his once had.